Okay, so it's great to be back for the class. We have not done a class in a couple of weeks, at least not the Wednesday night. We've had a lot coming up, and today as well. There's always a lot to do for a rabbi, but we persevere. We need to get back to giving classes, and that will give us more strength and more bandwidth and more energy and everything else that we need in order to be able to give the classes. So tonight's class topic, if you haven't been confused yet, it is about. Truthfully, it's about Mashiach. It's about the Messiah. And one of the things about the Mashiach is that many people understand the Mashiach to be something that's far off in the future, right? But a lot of people think, what do I care about that? I live in the here and now. I'll worry about Mashiach when we get there, right? They tell the story of a man called Moshe. Moshe was walking in Pinellas County, and suddenly a big rain started to fall. And Moshe was getting wet. So he walked into the nearest door he could find. And lucky for him, it was a Southern Baptist house of worship. Okay? So as he walks in, he hears the preacher announcing, "All those who want to enter the gate of heaven, please rise." And everyone stood up except for Moshe. So everyone's looking at him, and the preacher points out, "You over there, you Jew, you don't want to enter the gates of heaven?" He says, "I do, but what's the rush?" So for a lot of us, for Jews especially, right, we have this idea that what will be, right? In other words, so many religions live in the future, right? They think about it all day and all night. As Jews, we talk about the now, right? We got to make this world a better place. So with that idea in mind, where does Mashiach fall into the discussion? Why is it so important to have the Mashiach, to the point that we know one of the 13 principles of faith is, if you do not believe in the coming of Mashiach, you are not a believer? Why is the belief in the Mashiach such an important thing? And why is it something we need to remind ourselves constantly of? In fact, if you look in the prayers, the prayer for Mashiach appears again and again. Every rabbi finishes a speech with a prayer for Mashiach. We talk about Mashiach all the time. So it has to be more than just we want the reward, because we don't talk about reward that much in Judaism. We don't talk about entering heaven a lot, but we do talk about Mashiach. So that's the question we have today, is what is so important about the Mashiach? Why in Judaism is it something that we need to talk about? And today you'll see that by understanding more about Mashiach, you will understand how to live your life better today, okay? So in this course, this 3-week course, we are going to gain these few things. I'll give you a couple things you'll gain. Number one, you will understand why believing in Mashiach is so important. Number two, you will gain how knowing about Mashiach will help you today. And number three, we'll answer a couple fascinating questions about things that are said about Mashiach. So those questions you don't know yet, but when you read them, your head might split when you see what it says. And you'll wonder, is this really Judaism? And that's the fascinating thing. As we study about Mashiach, we'll learn how studying about Mashiach can actually change the way we live today. So there's not enough memory space. Okay, that's what's going on here. So with that being said, let us, let me just go here 1 second. Let me do one thing here to free up space. I don't know what's going on here. Just give me a second. It's slow because a lot of space being held. Okay.
Not enough skill available?
Yeah, I'm freeing up space. Okay. So let us start with this. Hopefully, I'm making the assumption, hopefully, all of you say that you believe in the Mashiach to some extent, right? What is Mashiach, the Messiah? To some extent, we believe that eventually there will come a day where things will be better. Okay, whether the details of Mashiach you're familiar with or not, that's something else. But I'm assuming you all believe in the Mashiach, but even if you don't, it doesn't really change my class. I'm just making the assumption. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. It's something we are taught since childhood. It's something we repeat in the prayers. But well, if we're honest with ourselves, how much time have we really spent on this belief? How much time have we spent thinking about this belief, right? Aside from a prayer when things are bad, how much time do we actually spend thinking about Mashiach? Not long ago, I mentioned to someone I was going to give a class about Mashiach, and the person told me, Rabbi, why do you want to talk about Mashiach? Talk about something real, something tangible, something we're dealing with today. Talk about our struggles, or maybe our struggle to put on tefillin, or whatever, light Shabbat candles. Talk about something we deal with today. And to be honest, it made me pause, because if Mashiach sounds like an abstract, like a future reality, like a future fantasy, then you know whose fault that is? It's my fault. That means as the rabbi, I have not explained it properly. As a rabbi, I have not properly described to you what Mashiach is and why Mashiach is so important to talk about and why it is central to Judaism, and it is one of the core principles of faith. So the first and most basic reason why Mashiach is such a core belief is because, as Stephen Covey, anybody heard of Stephen Covey? He's a famous I'm an inspirational writer. I forget what he wrote, but he says start with the end in mind, right? If you want to start a project, you need to start with the end in mind, right? So if you don't have the end in mind, if you don't have the end goal in mind, you're not going to accomplish what you're trying to do, right? So if you have a child and you're educating them, if you don't have an end goal of what you want that child to grow up to be, you will just grab a bunch of random things. You will not be living and leading in a organized manner. So, right, you will not be educating this child in an organized manner. You have to have in mind a vision. Obviously, you cannot promise what children will be, but you have to have a general vision of what you want for your child, okay? And if you don't know where you're heading, it's hard to stay inspired, right? It's very difficult raising children or anything in life that we're trying to do. If we don't have the goal in mind, it's very hard to continue, right? Anybody trying to build a business, if they don't have the end goal in mind, it's hard for them to continue through the daily grind. An example, a very coarse example that I can give you is baking a cake. If someone hands you a bunch of ingredients and tells you mix this and put it in the oven, but they never tell you what's going to happen with it, it's hard to get excited about it. It's messy, it's dirty, you got to get your hands dirty, assuming you don't have a mixer, right? It's a messy process. But if you know in the beginning, you are making a delicious chocolate cake, then it's a whole different story. Then working on this process of making this cake, the stirring has meaning. You're not just following the directions. You feel like you're building something. You feel like you're working towards something. Okay? And the same thing, Judaism is not just a list of instructions and rules. It's a process. It's a recipe. And that recipe ultimately will lead to the Messianic era. The more we can understand that Mashiach is what we're creating right now, then of course Mashiach is important. That is the goal. That inspires me to do what I want to do today. So I can stop looking at the rules as just a bunch of rules that have a bunch of details, but I see them as that recipe to bake that cake. I see them as the ingredients that will create this wonderful world that we're looking forward to in the times of Mashiach. Okay? So that is point number one, and I'm going to ramp this up. If that is true, in other words, if Mashiach is the culmination of what we do, right? So then obviously Mashiach is not just for dreamers. Remember, I started off, I said, why should we study about Mashiach? Is Mashiach just for dreamers? Is it just for people who want to fantasize about a better era? It's not at all. It's not about fantasizing. Let me give you another example. Think about it. We don't see God, right? We can't point to God physically. So how do we connect to God? We need to think about him. We need to contemplate about him, see him in his work, see him in the world around us. And that's how we create a relationship with God. Similarly about Mashiach, if we spend time contemplating about the era of Mashiach, then we will work towards it. Then we will spend more time working towards it. So in other words, just as with God, right? In order to continue our relationship with God, we need to think about him consciously every once in a while, not just rely on our innate faith. We need to consciously think about him because we don't see him. If we want to work towards this goal that we don't see, we need to keep thinking about it. You know, a lot of people who talk about goals. They talk about, grounding your goal, finding some connection to your goal, whether it's a little quarter or a little trinket. Maybe you're working towards a house. You have a little house in front of you. They have all different ways, so that little tricks to remind their mind that they're working towards a goal. So the same thing with Mashiach. It's not enough to just know what I told you a moment ago, right? It's not just enough to know that Mashiach is the culmination of our work. You want to keep that goal in mind, because that will keep inspiring you. That relationship will keep the mundane and the minutia of your day-to-day life. It will elevate it. You'll look at it totally different. That's why it's so important to study about Mashiach daily. Just as it's important to study about God, because God we do not see, and if we do not study about him, it will be hard to maintain that relationship. We need to study and read about the times of Mashiach, because that will create our emotional connection to Mashiach, and then we will work towards it. Yes.
Well, in every simcha, most every simcha that I've ever attended,
Yes.
sooner or later during the evening, everyone starts to sing.
Mashiach.
We want Moshiach now.
Yeah.
I think that
Under the chuppah, we break the glass. We want to remind ourselves we still need Mashiach. Yeah. I was watching a talk of the Rebbe just the other night, and he was giving a very powerful talk. And he said, if you would feel, it's the Talmud says, every single day that the temple is not built, it's as if it's destroyed. Why? That means if you weren't worthy of building it, that means it probably would have been destroyed in your era. So he said, if you would look at it every single day, the temple's not built, it's as if it's destroyed, you would turn over the world to bring Mashiach. You would do so many things, right? The reason we don't turn over the world is because we don't appreciate the era of Mashiach enough. So just to go back to my cake example, if you don't know what chocolate cake is, let's say you've never tasted it, so I may show you a picture. I can try to do things to make you connect with that chocolate cake. The more I connect you with that chocolate cake that you never ate, right? So, right, the more you're going to want to bake it, right? So if you imagine you found someone who never tasted chocolate cake, you start to describe it to him, you start to show him pictures, you show him someone eating it, going, right? They do it all on TV all the time, all the ads. They want to convince you to buy something that you don't need. How do they do it? They show someone enjoying it, whatever it is, right? So the same thing about Mashiach. Mashiach is something we've never experienced, we've never seen, and so we need to read about it and study about it to inspire ourselves to work towards it, because that is the goal. Everything we're doing is baking that cake, is making the Mashiach. Okay, so this was point number one. Point number one, why do we need to study about Mashiach? Because the goal gives shape and purpose to everything we're doing. So that every mitzvah we do, it's not a minutia, it is leading towards the ultimate goal. But I want to take it a step deeper. I alluded to it, but I want to take it a step deeper. I alluded to it with a cake, but I'll take it a step deeper, and I'll tell it with a story. The story goes like this. There was once a young camel. I don't know what they're called in English. Maybe there's a name for it. There was once a young camel, and the young camel asked Mama Camel, why do we have humps on our back? So what does the Mama Camel say? Because we take long walks in the desert, we might get thirsty and hungry, so we store all that food and water in our humps. And then the camel says, so Mama, why do we have long eyelashes? Because in the desert, there's these big sandstorms. We need to protect our eyes from the desert storms. And this protection allows us to continue traveling. So then the baby camel says, and Mama, why do we have these funny shaped feet? So the Mama says, that's to support our legs from sinking in the soft sand. It enables us to walk more quickly. So finally, the baby camel looks at Mama and says, Mama, if we have the humps to walk in the desert, and we have the eyelashes to prevent us from the wind in the desert, and we have the hoofs to prevent us from the sand in the desert, what are we doing in the Lowry Park Tampa Zoo?
no.
Right? So it's a famous story. So why did I tell the story? I don't remember. I had a point in there, but maybe I just wanted to tell a joke, right?
You have all the ability to worship.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to, right? If we have all these abilities, they're towards a goal. They're for something. They're not just to be there. They're for something. Very good. You could be a rabbi. You could connect to anything. It's like the other story I like to say. There's one time.
Tell you a story about it.
There's one time a story. I'll tell you a story. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You know exactly. I'll tell you a story about the story. There's one time a guy, he comes to shul riding his horse, and he's riding his horse,
Right.
and he has nowhere to put his horse when he gets to shul. There's car parking, there's no horse parking. So he asks one of the congregants, where should I put my horse? He says, we'll bring the rabbi. He says, the rabbi, what does the rabbi have to do with the horses? He says, listen, the rabbi, he could tie everything into the weekly Torah portion. So, is that the story you're going to say? Okay. Ive, yes. Yes.
Well, it seems to me that whenever we do think
Yes.
about Mashiach,
Mashiach.
it's in a setting of joyfulness.
We're supposed to remember Mashiach both in our joy and our sorrow. We remember Mashiach at all times. Yeah. Okay. So let us take this a step deeper. When we learn about Mashiach, we are not only, like some people, setting their sights on a future goal. We will actually learn how to live differently now, because the more we understand what the times of Mashiach are like, the more we can live it now. We can live because, and let me take it a step further. The more we live Mashiach now, the more we will actually bring the Mashiach closer. Why? Because every mitzvah is not just a brick towards a later reward of Mashiach, but rather it is a piece of the future reality already coming into existence. I'll say that one more time. Every mitzvah we do is not just a brick towards a later reward, but rather it's a piece of the future reality already coming into existence now. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is in reward systems, there are two types of reward systems, okay? And I'm going to give the example. The first type of reward system is a PlayStation. It's pretty, PlayStation. You know what a PlayStation is?
Yeah.
It's pretty popular now. What are they? What's the newest thing? The Switch, the Switch, whatever gaming system, okay? Lots of kids like to have these gaming systems. So imagine a child is told, if you go to school and you get good marks and you show up on time and you respect your teachers, after a month, I am going to give you a PlayStation, right? So that type of reward is what we would call a external reward. The reward is separate from the process. It's an external prize. It might help keep the kid motivated, but in truth, the prize has nothing to do with what the child is actually doing during the day. It's kind of a bonus that comes at the end, right? And honestly, it's possible that the kid doesn't even need to know what the prize is. Let's say you tell your kid, if you go to school every single day and get good grades and respect your teachers, I'm going to give you a big prize. And let's say your child trusts you, right? They don't need to know what the prize is, right? They know last time you got me a bike, the time before you got me a drone. This time it's going to be something big, right? So you see already how what the prize is has nothing to do with their actions, because the reward is not intrinsic to their actions. It's an external reward. As if you do this, I'll give you that. Many people look at God's rewards like that. If I make the good choices, if I become a good person, then in heaven, God will give me the kingdom of heaven for making the right choices. So,
I'll have a good life. I'll be great.
huh?
But meanwhile, till I get to heaven,
Well, till you get to heaven, you hope you have a good life. But many people focus on,
respect my wife, respect me, it was long by on the way.
it's true, there are internal rewards along the way, but the ultimate reward is not connected to the reward that you have in the meantime,
Yeah.
right? So that's one type of reward. And some people look at maybe the Messiah, they look at Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, they look at heaven in that manner. They look at, that make the right choices in this lifetime, God will reward me in the kingdom to come, right? Because I stood for him, he's going to reward me. But it's not connected to your actual actions. But then there is a reward that is actually a culmination of what you are doing. So let's take that child example. That child will now become a better person, right? That's an intrinsic reward. But let's go back to our example of the cake. Baking the cake, when you get the chocolate cake at the end of it, it's not an external reward. Oh, you did all the hard work, now I'm going to give you a cake, right? No, that's what I was building. I was building this cake. It's not just that I'm going to work hard in school, right? Like the previous example, right? I'm working hard in school so I could get something else. Some people could look at Mashiach like that. We make the right choices now so that we have in the end something beautiful. No, it's much more than that. We're baking a cake. What I'm doing right now is actually part of Mashiach. Every mitzvah I do is creating the world a more messianic era. Every single good deed I do is creating this world in a more messianic way. And therefore, in a sense, I can live Mashiach now. Because my actions right now are part of Mashiach. In other words, Mashiach is not a prize that God drops on us at the finish line. Rather, it's a result of thousands of years of Torah and mitzvahs and self-refinement. Every single good deed, every single act of faith, every time we do a mitzvah and we bring godliness into this world, that's another layer of the cake. That's another layer of the Geulah, of the redemption of the Messianic era taking shape. And if Mashiach is built from what we're doing now, then obviously we should learn about Mashiach. Because learning about Mashiach helps us live in a way that matches that future. In other words, if I'm creating that future now, then of course I need to live that now, right? So if I'm a child going to school, you know, like children complain in school, right? What do I need to learn algebra? I don't need to do it when I get older, right? They might be right? They don't. So you have to entice them with external rewards. But certain things they could understand. Oh, I can see how getting up on time, that's something I'll need when I'm an adult, right? Being the ability to overcome challenges. I can see how that is something I need when I get older. The more the child feels connected to the reward, the more inspired they are actually to do it, right? So a lot of times, that's actually always the best way to inspire children. When you can show them, ultimately, it's not always in the beginning, but when you can ultimately show them and they can appreciate how what you're teaching them, what you're showing them can lead them to that better life, then they can appreciate it more. Now, we know that educating children is one of the hardest things. So I'm not saying it's easy. So in our own lives, if we can see how Mashiach is something we're working towards, and every single action we do brings the Mashiach closer, not because it's a reward we get because we did enough good deeds, right? That's what many people think, right? If we reach the maximum amount of deeds, God, let's say, needs 2 trillion good deeds, and then Mashiach's going to come, right? Then our actions are not so connected to the Mashiach. But if Mashiach is a culmination of what we're doing, then by understanding Mashiach, we will understand what we have to do differently today. We have to understand we want to live in the manner of the Mashiach, because that's what we're actually bringing to this world. So to recap, we said number one is we should know about Mashiach because Mashiach is the goal. The more you can connect with the goal, the more you're going to work towards it. And we took that even a step deeper. It's not just an unrelated goal, but it's a very much related goal. So not only should I learn about Mashiach because I want to keep the goal in mind, right? It's like a player that thinks about the money they're going to make when they win the game. That's not intrinsic, right? It's not intrinsic. But if they want to play the game because they want to win, that's an intrinsic reward. We're playing to win. We're playing because we want whatever happens at the end, right? That's what we're working towards. And so therefore, we want to learn more about Mashiach because we are creating the era of Mashiach today. The era of Mashiach is not something that is distant, but it's happening right now. Okay? So if that's the case, we need to reorient how we look at the world. We want to look at the world in a Mashiach manner. And if we want to look at the world in a Mashiach manner, we need to look at what the world will look like when Mashiach comes. So I said, today we're building a Mashiach world. So what does the world look like when Mashiach comes? Any thoughts? What does the world look like when Mashiach comes?
Dead will come to life.
People come back to life, heaven and earth. Okay, what else?
Yeah, there'll be no strife. Everything will be peace.
Peaceful, okay.
No disease, no death, no.
So let me ask you a question. So if we're living in such a utopian era, what are we going to do with our time? What do you mean? People not fighting, people not making money. What are we going to do with our time?
I'm not gonna make the same mistakes as Snake next
We'll
time.
bathe in the light of God.
We're going to bathe in the light of God. All right. So, yeah, let's take a look at the text. First text for our class. This is from Maimonides, the 9th principle. He says, the 9th principle, right? 13 principles of faith. The 9th principle, and you have this on your papers if you're here in person, is not non-revocation. Namely, Is that what it says there? Okay. That's the wrong text. Okay, I'm looking at the wrong text. I wanted to show you from the Rambam. Okay, it's not here on the screen. Yeah, do we have that here? No. Okay, no, I got the wrong text on the screen. So I don't know where I put it. Okay, I'll have to share this other screen. Okay, let me hide this one for a second. Stop share. I will show you the other text. Okay. So there's a text in Maimonides. Maimonides has his last 2 chapters of his entire book. He has a 14-volume book. 14 volumes, goes through all of Jewish law in detail, organized manner. First one to be very organized. And his final 2 chapters are about Moshiach. And he has this beautiful description in chapter 12, which is the final chapter, in law number 5. And I'm going to share it for you on the screen. And we're going to read it. So he's going to make the point, which you all said, right? What happens when Mashiach comes? There's going to be no problems. You know, they say one of the biggest problems is when people are bored, right? Right? Huh?
Oh, we're bored.
We won't know we're bored.
Yeah.
You need to get a
Oh, you have to
PlayStation.
know
I need to get a PlayStation.
You need to get a PlayStation. That's bored. We are in the most
Let's
bubbly, fuzzy time.
all right, this is my notes. So I left it in my notes. I didn't put it in the I didn't put it in here. So let's scroll down. Here it is. Okay. Let me go back here, share the screen. Share the screen. All right, here's Maimonides. Hilchot Milachim, Laws of Kings. He writes like this. And you have the Hebrew as well. In that time, there will be no famine or war, no envy or competition. For good will flow in abundance. So what are you envious? You have everything you need. And all delicacies will be as plentiful as dust. So if that's the case, what is everybody going to do? Everybody's going to eat all day? Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. The occupation, but look, I'll explain you why we won't, because it says the delicacies will be as plentiful as dust. I'll explain that soon. The occupation of the entire world will be solely to know God. That is what we will do the entire day. All we will spend our time is to know God. So, what is, you know what, let's take a look. Let's take a look. I was going to tell you a parable, but before I tell you the parable, let's take a look at the screen. All right. So what is Maimonides saying? Okay. He says there's going to be no war, no hunger, no jealousy. Why? Because there's going to be abundance of good. But then he says something fascinating. Delicacies, pleasures will be like dust, and the world will be focused entirely on understanding God. So what does he mean with the phrase, and they're connected, these 2 phrases. What does he mean that delicacies are going to be found like dust? Why doesn't he say delicacies are going to be found like grass? I don't know. Like,
because we're compared to as us.
so why do delicacies have to be like us? We're better than delicacies.
Now, no,
Okay. Why dust? There's a lot of things. It's a fascinating commentary. We're also, by the way, these are compared to the stars also. And it says that it says in the Megillah, it says that we're compared to the dust when we're on the low and low. We're compared to the stars when we're on the high and high.
because it looks like it's worthless, but it has great value.
So why we should compare the delicacies to the stars, not to the dust? So the reason is because dust is worthless.
Mhm.
People do not consider dust as important. The Rambam Maimonides is not just saying that there will be less distractions. He uses specifically the word dust because he's saying all those things we find exciting and pleasurable today, all the Super Bowls and the Rose Bowls and the grass bowls and the acai bowls and the sushi bowls and whatever bowls, poke bowls, whatever bowls you have, yeah? Whatever bowls you have, right? Whatever bowl you have will be like dust. In other words, you won't find it exciting. There's an old ancient Jewish parable. It talks about a Jew who gets He gets stranded on a desert island, and he lands on an island, and the first thing he picks up is sand, and he looks at the sand, and it's not sand, it's diamonds. So he picks up the diamonds, he puts it in his pocket. Then he goes into town, he sits in the restaurant, he orders a big meal, and they ask him, what are you going to pay? He says, no worry, I got plenty of money. He pulls out a diamond. The guy starts laughing, and he says, this you're giving to me? That's dust. We have this everywhere. That's dust. So he says, so how do you pay here? He says, here, very rare, very precious is schmaltz, chicken fat. Chicken fat here is very, very expensive. Chicken fat is how you pay. And if you don't have any money, come work in the restaurant for us, and you'll earn some schmaltz, some chicken fat. And we have banks with all the chicken schmaltz. Anyways, this is a long story. I'm not going to go through the whole parable. The point is, at the end of the story, this guy becomes very wealthy. He owns freezers full of chicken schmaltz. Then he wants to go home, show off to his family. He puts it all in the boat, and he drives back home. And by the time he gets back home, all the chicken schmaltz is rotten. And his family says, you fool, you were there on an island full of diamonds, and all you took with you was a bunch of chicken schmaltz. But what's the point that I want to take from the story? The lesson from the story is we come to this earth to collect the mitzvot, the diamonds, and instead we collect chicken schmaltz. We collect PlayStations and cars and houses and sports and whatever. We forget about the important thing. But the parable I want to say is, yeah, if you're on an island where there's so much diamond becomes worthless, right? Anything that there's a lot of is not worth much, right? Anything there's a lot of is not worth much. So Maimonides is saying, we're not going to appreciate physicality anymore. It's not going to be important. It's not something hard to get. You ever hear about these wealthy people? Once they can buy everything, they actually have trouble finding meaning in life, right? Because once you can have everything, then you're not working towards getting the next big toy, the next big yacht, or whatever else it is. You have to find something else meaningful in life, right? So what does this mean practically? This means practically that when Mashiach comes, all the movies that we enjoy, and all the binge-worthy TV, and all the delicious food, and gourmet experiences, and best concerts, and biggest playoff games, when Mashiach comes, it will all feel like dust. Not because they'll be banned, not because they'll be forbidden, but because they won't matter anymore. They won't touch the deepest part of who you are. Sure, we'll still eat, still need to live, but what we will enjoy, what our real appetite will be for, is something deeper, is what Maimonides wrote over there on the screen, to know Hashem. That will be our deepest passion, our pursuit. That is what will give us the thrill. That is what we will chase in our lives. That will take the place of our entertainment and food and status and comfort. Our entire occupation, the entire day, will be to know God. You may say, well, Rabbi, I don't feel that right now. Of course, because you live in the exile. We live in the diaspora. We don't spend all our day pursuing the knowledge of God and connection to God, because we don't live yet in the Mashiach times, right? And let me be honest with you. I like chocolate cake. I like pizza. I like good things. I like my big ziti. I enjoy many of the physical things just like you do. Maybe not just like you do, but different things, right? I'm not saying that I am living the mindset of Mashiach, but here's the good news or bad news, depends on how you want to look at it. Whether you're ready or not, this is where the world is heading. The direction of the world is heading towards Mashiach. Mashiach is coming no matter what. And if that's the world we're heading to, we better prepare for it. The world we're heading to is going to be a world in which none of this physical stuff will matter anymore. That's the world we're going to be in. As much as you love it and appreciate it, it's not going to matter. So what do we do with that? When I gave this class the first time on Shavuot, I gave an example. I said, find a lot of times when people pass away, people like to do physical things to commemorate them, right? So, Daddy loved Papa John's pizza. Let's go to Papa John's in honor of his anniversary of his passing. You know what? Dad doesn't care for Papa John's pizza anymore. Now you may still go, well, not if you're Jewish, okay, but if you're not Jewish, or if you're in Israel, maybe they have a kosher one, right? In Israel, they have a Pizza Hut, right? You may still go to the kosher Pizza Hut, but that's about you. That's not about the deceased person. Your loved one who's passed away doesn't care about that pizza anymore. It's not meaningful to them anymore. The good deeds you do, that's what matters to them, right? So that's why I tell the families all the time, you really want to do something for your loved one who's passed, do something spiritual. They don't care about that physical stuff anymore. It doesn't talk to them. They've shed their body. Those things don't matter to them. You want to go there for nostalgia, for you to have a feeling of connection, sure. But don't forget, that is the secondary item. The main item is the spiritual things that the soul of your loved one cares about. And so the same thing I would say is, as we get towards Mashiach, is we need to keep this in mind. When Mashiach will come, we will be like those souls. We will be much more spiritual. We will only care about that. That's the world we're heading to. We're heading on a freight train. We're heading straight towards that. And so I'm not saying you're going to drop all your physical pleasures overnight, but we need to start practicing for the world that's coming. That means slowly but intentionally shifting our focus, prioritizing learning of Torah over the ball game, prioritizing prayer over the movie, increasing our connection to God over our connection with money, making decisions that reflect where we're going, not just where we are. So this is already one idea how you can see. Knowing a little bit about Mashiach already can change the way you live your life. Knowing a little bit about Mashiach can change how you change your perspective. When you know that the ultimate world that we are building, that we are heading to, and whether you're building it or not, the world's going to get there, right? The world that we are building every single day is a world in which physical pleasures don't matter. Let's try and live that a little bit more today. Yes?
So when God says to Abraham that his descendants will be like the dust of the earth,
Yes.
sand on the sea, or,
Yes.
or the stars in the heaven. Well, we know that that's not true now, but that's describing then the advent of Messianic age.
I think the stars of the heaven is where we're going to be.
They're all kind of
Yeah.
equal.
Okay. So this has been the first part of the class. If you have any questions, I suggest you ask them now. But we have made 3 points about Mashiach. We wanted to understand why is it important to talk about Mashiach isn't just a future fantasy. We said, number one, keeping a goal in mind inspires you to work towards it. Number two, understanding that that goal is not just a external reward that is dropped on us at the end, but it's actually what we are building now. It's like baking the cake. So that will change how we are operating today. And then we demonstrated that by showing that once we understand what the Messianic era is, in a world in which physicality doesn't matter and just connection to God, well, automatically, I understand that one of the ingredients in creating the Messianic era, truthfully, every mitzvah is making a statement that what matters is God, right? Because every time you make a choice to do a mitzvah, you're doing it at the expense of something else, right? Every choice we make in life is we're doing this and not that. So generally, when we choose to do a mitzvah, we are taking an intentional moment to say, what matters is God, right? That's what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is basically making a declaration. What matters is God, right? A simple one. Someone lights Shabbat candles. It takes a minute to prepare and a minute to light. You could have done something else with that time. You are lighting those Shabbat candles because you are making a declaration. What matters is God, not my physical life. Lighting candles is nothing, no physical gain per se. Putting on tefillin, same thing for men. Is when you put on those tefillin, you are making a statement. What matters is God. When you bake challah and you separate a piece of it for God, you could have eaten that piece of challah. You're separating for God. Every mitzvah is a declaration, a small declaration saying what matters in my life is God. And so that is what we are building towards. Every single mitzvah we do, every single time we choose to study Torah, every single time we pray, we are placing God front and center in our lives. And the more we can change our mindset towards that, the faster we will propel the process, and the faster we will bring the Mashiach. Yes.
Does this mean that when the Mashiach comes, everyone will have the same modality? They will be like us.
It says in the prophet says that in the times of Mashiach, everybody will serve Hashem.
So they become like us.
Like us. Will they be exactly us? Not necessarily, but like us, yes. That's a discussion for another Mashiach class. Mashiach has many topics.
Isaiah was right.
Yeah. All right, so the story goes, a Jewish man is speeding at the highway at 1 a.m. and a policeman stops him and says, "Where are you racing at this hour?" He says, "I'm heading to a lecture." So the cop says, "A lecture? Where are you going to lecture at 1 a.m.?" He says, "Oh, my wife." Okay. So yeah, exactly. Yep. It's not that short. It's much longer than that. All right. So here at this point in the class, I'm wondering how far I go with this, because what we're going to do next is I've given you, so to speak, I've given you the inspirational talk, the reflection, the inspiration. But now we're going to shift gears, because now we're going to get into a class. Till now was almost like a sermon, an inspiring idea about Mashiach. Now we're going to open up texts and confront some challenging ideas. Because, as I said earlier, if we're going to talk about living Mashiach, we need to understand a little bit more about what that world looks like. I gave you one idea, but the more and more we understand about what Mashiach looks like, every single piece we understand of it will change our perspective and will change the way we live today. And in order to understand about Mashiach, we need to read about the times of Mashiach. And when you read about the era of Mashiach, there's many things that you read that will make you question and wonder. There's a lot of questions about things that happen in the time of Mashiach. And when we delve into them and understand them, then you will appreciate not only the times of Mashiach, but you will appreciate how you can live today in a Mashiach manner. Okay? So we are going to tackle 3 major issues, 3 areas where our sources seem to contradict the truth and the eternity of Torah and mitzvos. Each of these texts suggest that the Torah will change when the Messiah comes. And not only does this raise theological questions, but it also sounds, at face value, like some other religions that we may know. So there are some texts that are written, and I don't like to end a class with a question, but that is possibly what we're going to do today. We might end the class with a question, which means you'll have to come back next week. You might have to come back next week, yeah, maybe, or think about it. You might have to come back next week to find the answer. Okay? Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, you're up to it? Okay. You're not scared. Okay. So with this, we're going to turn to, you know what? So I'll give you a sneak peek. I'll give you a sneak peek of what are the 3 issues we're going to talk about. Okay? 3 issues we're going to talk about is, number 1, there's a statement that says there will be a new Torah. Okay? It's based on the prophet Isaiah, that when Mashiach will come, God will teach a new Torah. Okay? Number 2, we're going to talk about, there's a concept that says that the commandments will be nullified in the future. When Mashiach comes, we're going to get rid of the mitzvot, so to speak. That sounds dangerously close to some other religions that claim that Torah was a temporary system meant to be replaced later. So what do they really mean? And number 3, our final question is going to be, what happens when the negative mitzvot, when evil disappears? Right? In other words, okay, aside from positive mitzvahs possibly, right, going away, it says, how do negative commandments apply if nobody desires to do evil? So let's say, don't kill. Well, if I don't have any desire to kill or murder, right? If I don't have any desire to murder, or don't steal, right? If I have no desire to steal because I've gotten rid of my evil inclination, so then seemingly the negative commandments, so to speak, have no more meaning. In other words, negative commandments only have meaning when you have a choice. If there's no choice because you don't want it anymore,
Steal will not exist.
I mean, it'll exist. There's a possibility, but nobody will want it, right? Nobody will want it. Nobody will care for it. So, right? So, right? Huh?
Like there is still a law in the Florida Highway Patrol that you cannot tie your alligator to the fire department extinguisher.
Yeah.
Because who knows? Maybe everything will turn around and Mashiach will leave, no?
Yeah.
And we'll need the law of it.
So let's take a look at some text. And let's go back here. Okay. All right. So this is what I was going to go with. We're going to start off with Maimonides' 9th principle. Maimonides' 9th principle. So Maimonides has 13 principles. The 13th principle is about what? Mashiach, very good. The 13th principle is about Mashiach. So what is the 9th principle? The 9th principle is about the eternity of the Torah. So let us read what Maimonides says over here. So Maimonides says, the 9th principle is non-revocation. Non-revocation. Namely, that this Torah of Moshe will never be revoked, and no other Torah will ever come from God. One may not add to it or delete from it, neither in the written nor the oral Torah. As the verse states, you must not add to it or delete from it. Okay, the Torah says you cannot add or delete from the Torah, which obviously means that the mitzvos are forever. If the Torah says you cannot delete any of the commandments, you cannot have less commandments or more commandments, can't add to the commandments, that means that the mitzvos are eternal, right? Moshe says, right?
You just told that. You just told us.
I told you that's the question. I was giving you a sneak peek to the questions. But I'm starting from the top. I'm sorry. I like to give you what's up ahead, but now we're going back to the beginning, okay? So Maimonides says in his 9th principle that the Torah will never change. What is it based on? It says in Deuteronomy, you must not add to it or subtract from it. This is what delete, subtract, same thing. You must not add or subtract. You cannot add to the commandments or delete. So, for example, you cannot say that there are 640 commandments. Right? What about rabbinic law? How do the rabbis add commandments? Are we messing? Are we going against this principle?
It's not.
Very good. The rabbis are not saying that there are now 614 commandments. The rabbis are saying there are 613 commandments, and God gave us, the rabbis, the authority to add certain decrees, to add maybe even rabbinic mitzvos, but the rabbis will never come and say, we are going to add another biblical commandment. Take a look at this next text. Let me see here if I have it here. Follow up. Actually, no, I'm not going to show that next. I'm going to go to text number 2. Let's go to text number 2. Yep. All right. So he says like this: many mitzvos were instituted by the sages and the prophets. All of Israel accepted them, and they are obligatory. This is not considered adding to the Torah. We do not say God commanded them, but that the sages instituted them, and we are obligated to follow them. What then is the purpose of the Torah's warning? Do not add to it. It means,
It's
Can I continue?
semantics.
It means, it's much more than semantics. It means, let's continue. It means that a prophet does not have the right to introduce any new precepts, saying that the Torah has commanded them. The Torah may be added to by the prophets only in the form of rabbinic enactment, issued by the high court with a particular reason and with the appropriate wording. That is, it would include the idea that we are commanding the people to observe this mitzvah in addition to the Torah, not as a part of the Torah itself. Otherwise, it would indeed be considered a violation of you must not add to it. What is the most popular rabbinic commandment? Anybody knows? Most popular rabbinic commandment. One that many people do.
What?
Lighting Shabbat candles or lighting Hanukkah candles. Nobody lights the Hanukkah candles and tells himself, I am right now doing a mitzvah of the Torah. Everybody knows there's no Hanukkah candles in the Torah. Right. So it's not considered adding to the Torah. The rabbis made a mitzvah
That falls under. I forgot that.
that it falls under the rabbi's rabbinic authority, right? It falls under the rabbi's rabbinic authority. So the Torah gave the rabbis the authority. And just to explain how much authority they have, what blessing do you make when you light your Hanukkah menorah?
The whole first night or the second?
The final blessing.
No,
Asher Kiddushanu. But you say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah menorah," right? Let me ask you. It just says in the mitzvah, sorry, in the blessing, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to light the menorah." Wait a second. Did God command us to light the menorah?
Maybe it was in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, who knows? But
It came much later. It came much later. So the answer is, God in the Torah commands us to listen to the sages.
Or he predicted.
And therefore, when you follow what the sages tell you to do, you are automatically following a commandment of God.
Thank you.
You have so much power.
Is anybody questioning my authority over here? Did I hear questions?
Jump on one.
I don't hear.
Now.
All right, you have a good question, but that's honestly, it is for another course. We touched upon it very deeply in the course called Decoding the Talmud. We touched upon it a lot. I believe in the first and second class. You can find it on YouTube. How rabbinic authority is baked into the Torah. So I would suggest, if you are ready to have your head spin, listen to that class.
Okay.
But the first class was much more simplistic. You could follow along in that. But at a very simple point, the Torah clearly says you come to the rabbis and the prophets of your generation. How do you know the rabbis are right? There's a system in place. There is a system, goes by majority rule. And we spoke about it at length.
Years in January.
The system changed only due to exile. So we discussed this in our course. We said, why did the rabbis disagree so much? The disagreements only really came about to a large extent once there was exile, once Jews were scattered throughout the world. It used to be when Jews were in Israel, if there was a disagreement, if there was a disagreement, you would go up to the high court, the Sanhedrin, and they would adjudicate, and there would be one decision. But as time went on, and as Jews were separated, the disagreements came about more because of our separation. But there's a system in place of the way to do it. Yes. Someone here?
The Arab Rashi today, no?
Did you hear the door?
Heard something.
No,
No?
No support?
Okay. Yeah, what were we saying? Yeah, Steve, what was your question?
oh, okay, the commandment says not to change the Torah. Now, we haven't changed the Torah.
Right.
What about the people that have? And that doesn't say, to me, it says everybody should not change the Torah.
So there's two things. One is, you mean like, why do nobody's allowed to change the Torah, but that commandment was not adding and subtracting to the commandments. Now those commandments are only given to the Jewish people. People who are not Jewish have their own seven commandments, the 7 Noahide laws.
But they changed ours. Like, for instance, thou shalt not murder turned into thou shalt not.
All right, well, I'm not. Well, of course, I'm saying, have they said that some of the commandments don't apply? Sure, they do, but it's incorrect in our belief. Our belief is the Torah is eternal and it cannot be changed. And the rabbinic decrees are really, as I said, not adding to the Torah. Just want to give you one more example. What would be adding to the Torah? Adding to the Torah, for example, would be, let's say there's a mitzvah to wear tzitzis on the 4 corners of your clothing. So let's say if you put tzitzis, the strings, on 5 corners of your clothing, if you had a 5-cornered garment, that would be considered adding. Subtracting could obviously be deleting a mitzvah, but it could also be saying that even a 3-cornered garment needs strings. Okay, those are just examples. So it's all changed. It's all adding or subtracting to the commandments. Okay, understand? Okay. So-
It's like interpretation as opposed to.
So we said there's three elements to rabbinic teachings, if that's what you're asking about, rabbinic teachings. One element of rabbinic teachings is understanding. One is making their own decrees. And one is making fences around some of the mitzvahs. But I don't want to go too far in the rabbinic commandments. All right. Are we good? So back to the ninth principle of Maimonides. Now that we understand what rabbinic law is not adding. Rabbinic law is just saying this is biblical law. And we also light the Hanukkah candles because the rabbi said we should light the Hanukkah candles. Nobody thinks we're lighting the Hanukkah candles as one of the 613 commandments, right? Or they shouldn't be. Okay.
What it falls under, by the way?
What's what? What is what?
The Hanukkah candle falls under the tikkun of which.
The Hanukkah candle fall under the commandment to listen to the rabbis.
Just
It's in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
It's in Deuteronomy, yeah.
In other words, it's kind of like the difference between code and law.
Yeah.
Codes are looked at in the same way as laws, but they are not created in the same way. Same as.
So I don't understand code and law to tell you enough that your parable is correct, but it's possible. Okay, I just can't tell you enough because I don't know enough about it. I don't want to make a connection between the two. Okay, so let us recap the ninth principle. The ninth principle is, again, I believe with complete faith that this Torah will not be changed, and there will never be another Torah from the Creator, blessed is He. And the Talmud Sanhedrin 99a says, even if he says all the Torah is from heaven except for this verse, he's considered a heretic. So if someone comes and says, I believe in the entire Torah except for one little verse, that's considered a heretic. You have to believe in every single section of the Torah, right? The Torah is stories. No, the Torah is lessons. In fact, most of the Torah is not stories. But even the stories are lessons. But the stories are what most people read. Takes up Genesis, part of Exodus, but the rest of Exodus is not a story. Leviticus is not a story. Parts of Numbers is not a story. Many parts of Deuteronomy is not a story. Most of the Torah is actually not stories. But the stories that are in there are the stories that are important lessons. Okay? So I'm going to end today's class with a question. Okay? We're going to go to this last thing. We have established unequivocally that mitzvot are eternal. Mitzvot will never change. It's not just an idea, it's one of the 13 principles of faith. We also explained how rabbinic law does not conflict with this. As long as rabbinic law is framed correctly, it does not add to the Torah, it functions within it. But now comes the problem. We will look at a text that does not just imply, but it seems to outright state that mitzvot will be nullified in the future. So let us take a look at texts 3 and 4. Let's share on the screen text 3 and 4. Text number 3. All right, here is the Talmud Gemara Nida. Talmud Gemara, we explained in the Talmud course the difference. It says like this: our rabbis taught a garment in which a forbidden kilayim mixture of wool and linen was woven, but the nature of its precise location was lost, may be made into a burial shroud. So I have to explain what this means. Everybody knows there's some foods we don't mix. What is that?
Food?
We don't mix
Yeah.
milk and meat. When we plant, can we plant everything together?
No.
Not allowed to plant wheat with grapes, right? We don't graft seeds together. We also don't plow a field with a mixture of animals. You cannot put under the yoke a horse and a cow together. There is also another forbidden mixture. So mixtures in the Torah, a lot of forbidden mixtures. There's a mixture called wool and linen. You have a clothing, a blanket made of a mixture of wool and linen, you are forbidden to wear it. So if you have a wonderful wool suit and it has one strand of linen in it, you are not allowed to wear it. There are people who are experts in testing clothing for this, because garments, like food, if it's under a certain percentage, don't have to list it. And so you can have a garment that says it's a wool garment. That's why I only wear polyester. No, I'm kidding. But you can have you can have a wool garment, and it says 100% wool, but it actually may have linen in it. It could be a problem. And there's lists out there, and there's ways to figure out if you have a problem or you don't have a problem. So again, the Torah forbids wearing wool and linen. So here's the question.
That's in one verb, not a wool jacket and a linen
Correct.
shirt.
You can wear a wool jacket and a linen shirt. So now, once you understand that prohibition, there's a prohibition against mixing wool and linen. Let's talk about burial shrouds. People here know about burial shrouds? We bury people in shrouds, clothing. Generally simple clothing, because we want everybody to be equal. But we bury people in special clothing, and they're called burial shrouds. Okay, so they're... Here's a question. If someone had a garment that had wool and linen mixture, but you could not locate the linen inside of it, if you were able to locate the linen inside of it, you would take out the linen, and you would have clothing that you could use. Remember, clothing used to be very expensive. You would buy a suit and have it for a long time, and you would patch it and patch it and patch it, right? So the story was, someone came to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I have this beautiful shirt and beautiful pants. Very expensive, but there's a strand of linen inside of it. I cannot locate it. There's nothing I can do with it. I can't wear it. But yesterday, my great-grandfather passed away. Can I bury him? Can I use it for burial shrouds? Right? So what's the question? Question is, because when people pass away, they no longer have to keep any mitzvos. In fact, when we bury people and we wrap them in the talis, we actually make the talis not kosher before we bury them in it. Yep, we take the talis and we render it not kosher before we bury them in it.
On purpose,
On purpose, correct. Because mitzvos don't apply when we pass away. We cannot do any more good deeds. That's why it's important to stay alive. But we cannot do any more good deeds once we pass away. So the question is, if you are, can you take this piece of clothing that you cannot wear because it's obviously shatnez, it's a mixture of wool and linen, and you can't fix it because you don't know where that strand of linen is. The question is, can you bury someone in it?
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, you could say yes, but what's the problem? What might happen?
Mashiach will come.
Mashiach will come. The person will come back. The person will come back from the dead. They'll be resurrected in this clothing, and they'll wake up living in sin.
Really, because when he comes back,
How can I get? But not.
Huh?
I'm so confused.
I thought.
So
when
this is the question.
Mashiach returns, it will not exist anymore.
but it
Wait.
says here the Torah.
So one second. We said a moment ago the Torah mitzvahs will never be nullified. So seemingly, when they become resurrected, they'll have a problem, and nevertheless, the rabbis said you could bury someone in his shrouds. And Rabbi Yosef says we see from here that when Mashiach comes, the mitzvos will be annulled. That's a problem. That's a problem, because that contradicts the ninth principle of Maimonides. So my friends, I'm not going to answer today because this is the end of class number 1.
5 more minutes.
This is the end of class number 1. But I want you to see the question. Think about it. Obviously, the answer is going to be mitzvahs do apply when Mashiach comes. We're going to have to reconcile this. But here's the beautiful part. When we will reconcile this problem, you will appreciate mitzvahs to such a greater extent. You will understand what mitzvahs when Mashiach comes mean. In other words, there's a reason why they say mitzvahs will be annulled when Mashiach comes. It's not just because they're trying to have fun with us and twist our minds and drive us crazy. There's a reason. Mitzvahs, when Mashiach comes, will be elevated to a certain level. And that's why it says when Mashiach comes, mitzvahs will be annulled. And based on that, once we understand the beauty of mitzvahs when Mashiach comes, we will learn how to already change our outlook on mitzvahs today. That's what you're going to gain. So you want to come back next week. We're going to answer this very problematic question. And by answering that question, you are going to walk away with a greater a more beautiful appreciation for mitzvahs, and you will never look at a mitzvah the same way again. So to recap our class, leave off summarized. We'll summarize our class to recap. We started off, why is it important to learn about Mashiach? We said, start with the end in mind. You need to know what the goal is. Then we continued and said the goal is not just an external goal, it's an intrinsic goal. And we said, therefore, by what we do today is not just we get an unconnected reward in the future, we're actually building it today. Then we said, so what are we building towards? Well, on a very simple level, we're building towards a world in which the physical pleasures don't matter and just God matters. And therefore we said every mitzvah is a declaration of that. Every mitzvah we do is a declaration that what matters in my life is not the Netflix and not the game and not the baseball game and the bowl and this bowl and that bowl. What matters is God. And so therefore we want to bring Mashiach faster and quicker and get to that era that's coming anyways. So you should already start thinking about giving up some of your physical pleasures. That era that's coming anyways, we get to it every single day by making a choice to prioritize God a little bit more. I'm not there yet either, okay? But prioritize God a little bit more in your life. And finally, we end off the class with a fascinating question based on Maimonides' principles of faith. Mitzvahs will never change. We explained how the rabbis are not adding, and the rabbis are infallible, of course, but that's another story. But we explained how mitzvahs will never change. And therefore, we have to understand, what does it mean that it says when Mashiach comes, the mitzvahs will be annulled. And next week, we'll give the answer to that question, and you will walk away with the most beautiful understanding of the mitzvot in your life. And with that, I will stop the recording. And I thank you all for coming.